What's up, guys? Welcome to the stream tonight. Glad you guys could join us. We're not going to get rolling right away. We're going to give a little bit of time for everybody to get settled. I'm just starting a little bit early so I can check my camera stuff. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. Make sure everything's coming through all right. Some of my levels seem to be a little wonky there. There we go. That's a little better. Let's make sure that we're coming through on the right thing here, though. Hey, Susie. Hey, Blondie. Hey, Lee. Leah. Everybody seems to be here. Well, a few of you guys seem to be here. Kay's here, too. Awesome. Good to see you guys. As you can see, I've had a haircut since the last live stream. I did it myself, too, so saved myself a little bit of money. That's always good, Susie. I need to do a little more cleaning around here myself. Not in the office, but, the house in general. Probably gonna do some laundry tomorrow. Whew. It's been a long week. But, I think I might have to start doing more live streams during the week. I don't know. My numbers are kind of down. I don't know what I'm doing here, but got to get them numbers up. Nice, nice. I I feel you on that one, Leah. Working all the time over here. I've been working on the next week's content, which is coming together nicely. I've still got to put together something for Friday, but I think I've got something in mind. I think we might be going back to the botanical gardens next Friday, which I know you guys have been curious to know what's going on there, but we just had a big story on that one, so I figured I'd give that one a little bit of time to simmer there. But I've got a couple of stories tonight, I think, and they've all got a little bit of a theme. Well, most of them do. The ones I wrote do. I was apparently in a scout mood, so we've got three new scout stories. Some of them might even be a little bit connected. You do, Leah. You do. If you guys want me to read them, send them my way. Um, I promised you guys a writing contest. It occurs to me, so eventually I've got to get off my butt and figure that one out. We'll probably talk about that on the next live stream. I'm thinking sometime in July, probably like. What I'm thinking now is that we'll run a writing contest, probably July, August, September, October, November, and December. And the winner of each contest will get, a signed book of their choosing, which will be pretty cool. Um, and then we'll just, we'll send it out signed, and you'll have your own copy there. Hang on a second. Let's see. Okay, sorry. Text from. I got a buddy that wants to play some pirates later, so we're trying to strategize on when we're gonna do that. But yeah, I think we're gonna do a little writing contest probably for about the next 6 months, and then we'll talk about it on the next one. But again, I might read the winners on here. Um, I might, I don't know, I might put them in a book. I don't know. We'll figure something out. And if it's something that you guys enjoy, we'll do it more often. I could even see reading them on the channel, do them on the Tuesday, Thursday slots. That way, we've got more guest stuff, which is always cool. Let's see here. Tonight, though, we're going to see how many we can get through before my voice gives out. A theme? There might be a theme, Blondie. I don't know. We'll think about it. There will definitely be one for the October and the December one. I want to see your best Halloween. Actually, we might do October, November, and December. I want to see your best holiday horror on those, for Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas. But we'll figure something out on the rest of them, I think. We'll figure something out. We'll have some fun, We'll get a little something going. And of course, now that I've got time to talk about it. We can figure out the logistics, Just finished the last edits on my Dollar General Beyond book, so expect to see that one pretty soon. I'm kind of thinking now. I've been doing a lot more work for ACX, which is the company that does all the Audible stuff. Like, if you narrate for ACX, your voice is probably going in an Audible book. And I've been picking up a little bit of work there. So, I've been thinking about just going ahead and narrating the stuff for the Douglas Gage Beyond Savings book, and go ahead and try to get that up on ACX. It also helps me find any other, little problems and stuff with it, like typos and things. So that'll be cool. You are right about that, Leah. October is a busy time of the year, especially for me. I probably need to go ahead and start writing my October stories, because I always show out a little bit for you guys. And of course, we'll have to get some more like holiday stories and stuff about Kashmir and about the people that live there. Now that the Barker is back in Kashmir, maybe we can get some shenanigans there too, which should be fun. But yeah, no, I'm thinking about going ahead and narrating the stuff for the Dollar General Beyond so I can do the final edits on it. So it'll probably be out towards the end of July or the beginning of August, because that's going to take a while. I'm currently catching some side work on ACX, so I've been doing a lot of other narrations as well. I've been narrating a romantasy at the moment. It's pretty good if you're into that kind of thing. And then I'm doing a self-help book as soon as Big Homie there sends me the friggin' manuscript, which it appears as of now he still has not done. So hopefully he sends that pretty soon, because it doesn't look like it's a lot of work, if we're being honest. Like, it's 2.5 hours of recording. Your boy can knock that out in like a day. But no, if any of you are like aspiring voice people, you should check ACX out. It's pretty cool. You just put out your audition, and they tell you whether they want you or not. And I've got a little bid of an advantage having decent equipment, but, it's always fun. Those of you that didn't catch the last live stream, I had to move my office into the library, so I'm in a different spot now. I don't know if that's, like, jarring or not, but we are setting up pretty good here. I like it in here a little better. The acoustics are a little bit nicer, not as echoey as it was in my office. Some of that's to do with my wall of memory foam behind the camera here, but, we're figuring it out. But anyway, for tonight's stories, we've got... It's a scout theme. So, you'll be getting a lot of, like, scout stories tonight. I don't know, I was just, summertime always puts me in a mood to write about, like, Boy Scouts and stuff. I was never a Boy Scout. My parents didn't have the money when I was growing up, but my kid brother was, and it always looked like a lot of fun. So, I think scary Scout stories usually do pretty well, too. Like, people like to think about weird stuff happening in the woods like that. Oh, I can't read that one first. That one's got spoilers in it. So we will read. We'll read the new short stories first, and then I think we'll have enough time to get to Ranger Tales, and then maybe we'll read some of the other stories for the Tuesday Thursday stuff. Hey Lou, glad you could make it, man. Let's see. Okay, so that's not the one I want. Where'd it go? Bear with me for a second. There it is. Alrighty, so everybody get comfy, and we're gonna start some live readings. And I'll stop in, at the end of every paragraph and answer questions if you got questions and stuff. If you've got questions about like content and things, let me know. Hey Kevin, and to say hi to people as they come in. Just ask away. I'm pretty open about that kind of thing. The stuff I can answer. And yeah, all right. Let's get rolling on these live readings. This first one is called The Orville Site. So I hope you enjoy. Hang on just a second. My youngest son is very excited about whatever he's watching there. Alrighty. It was supposed to be my last year in the Scouts, but it would turn out to be my very last year for more reasons than just... Try that one again. We're off to a great starter. It was supposed to be my last year in the Scouts, but it would turn out to be my last year for more reasons than just age. I had been in the Boy Scouts since I was 6. My parents thought I needed exercise, and they had been right. I was starting my career as a human couch potato early, and I'd come home from daycare and fall into the cushions as I watched cartoons by the fistful. I had started recording some of my favorites on the TiVo for later consumption by the time I was 5, and that was the summer my dad decided to make a change. My birthday is in June, and just after I turned 6, he took me down to the YMCA and signed me up for Boy Scouts. I wasn't terribly happy about it. I wanted to watch cartoons and kill time until I had to start school. But Dad insisted that it would be a lot of fun. You'll make friends and learn new skills, and you'll be part of something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So I went along with it and agreed to try it out. I started at the bottom, Scout, and after a few meetings of less than enthusiastic participation, I made a friend. Hang on a second. This thing thinks it's such a comedian. I made a friend. Okay. Making sure it wasn't picking up the the audio on my other one. Sometimes I got to be a little careful about that. All right. For those of you just joining us, we're reading The Orville Site, which is a scout tale. So I hope you like tales about Boy Scouts. I made a friend. All right. Jacob was in the same boat I was. His dad wanted him to get off the couch and out into the woods, and he was clearly phoning it in as well. He had the idea that we could sit next to each other, and maybe they wouldn't notice if we were just kind of getting by. So we did, and we started talking, and before long we were both having fun. Our knots got better, our crafts got less messy, and after a year and a half, which flew by, we advanced to Tenderfoot. We were both pretty surprised, but the Scoutmaster told us how much improvement we'd made, and we both realized that we liked the Scouts, but we liked being... Hang on. And we both realized that we not only liked Scouts, but we liked being part of Scouts. We were working on our advancement to second class Scout when a new kid joined. A kid who would make our duo a triple threat. Nick was already a second class Scout, but he'd come from a different troop, and Scoutmaster. Hang on. And the Scoutmaster told him to take a seat at our table. Soon we were talking and laughing and having a blast in that way that kids with a new friend sometimes do. The three of us took second in the Pinewood Derby that year. Nick drove and we crewed. And our... Can't talk tonight, goodness. And our rocket flew the highest. Blech. Hang on. Skipped something here. And our rocket went the highest at the science showcase. My couch. My couch potato days were well behind me now, and Dad said he couldn't be prouder of me. It was the summer of my 15th birthday, and I was looking forward to going to high school. It was bittersweet, too, because I had told my Scoutmaster that I'd be hanging up my uniform in the fall. By that point, Nick, Jacob, and I were all that was left of the original troop, and we were helping him with the younger Scouts. All three of us were Life Scouts, and I was a little bummed that I'd never make it to Eagle Scout. I didn't have to stop going. They let you stay until you're 18, but I felt that it was time. I was going to start working a part-time job soon, and to be honest, I was afraid of getting made fun of for still being in the Boy Scouts. I know that sounds a little shallow, but most of the people I knew had done Scouts. Most of the people I knew who had done Scouts had gotten out at 12, and I was starting to feel like I was a little too old for the uniform. Jacob said that he would probably hang it up too, but Nick said he was going to make Eagle before he left. That was the other thing I was conflicted about. Jacob and I were going to the same high school, but Nick's family sent him to a private Christian academy, so Scouts were the only time we really got to see him. He said that he would stay in touch, but I think all three of us knew that it would likely be our last summer together. Let's see. Let's see who keeps blowing up my phone here. Discord. Alrighty, for those of you just joining us, we're reading the Orville site, so grab something hot to drink and pull up a chair. It's just getting good. We were all looking forward to the campout in Mineral Hill State Park, and as we rode up there on one of the big yellow buses that Scoutmaster Mark always rented for the trip, we were surrounded by the sounds of laughing, yelling kids who were looking forward to a weekend in the woods. "You bring any snacks?" Jacob asked. The three of us squeezed in the back seat. "You know it," I told him, opening my backpack to show him the collection of chips and sodas that I had brought. "Nick, what about you?" Jacob asked. Nick grinned. "Oh, I got snacks, but I brought the good stuff, too." "You mean," Jacob asked, but Nick shushed him, saying later when he tried to whisper it. Mineral Hill State Park was a place where we had gone for campouts for years. Whew, excuse me. Hey, Bev, good to see you. Oh yeah, we're all settled in now. Got the studio all up. Been doing a lot of recording. It's a good spot for it. Let's see. Where we had gone for camp. It was a well-maintained park, something they had cultivated back in the 80s when the land had been used as a mine or something. And there were lots of bathrooms and trails and a swimming hole with a rope to swing off. It was a great place. a place that played quite often in my memories, and after that weekend, in more than a few of my nightmares. The park had legends of its own, of course. There were open mine shafts on the property, and you had to be careful not to fall into them. There were supposed to be some kind of government testing site there in the 50s, but the facility had since closed. It had something to do with animal testing, but no one was really sure about it. There were ghost stories of spectral miners and noises heard in the woods at night, but they were just stories, tales cooked up for campfire stuff. I'd been coming here for years, and I'd never seen anything weirder than a bear or a couple of possums that got into our tent. Eyesight's terrible. Let me zoom that in a little bit. Yeah, there we go. The park was safe. That's why our parents weren't afraid to let us go there. Safe as a park could be, they would have said. We got there before lunch and started setting up camp. Some of the kids were working on badges for pitching tents and making fires, so they were working on that as we unpacked the bus and set up cook fires in the first aid tent. All three of us had first aid training, and Nick and I were even CPR certified. We had little doubt that we could tend to the scrapes and boo-boos that this bunch would get. And as we got our three-man tent set up, Jacob asked Nick if he could see what he'd brought. Nick opened his bag and held out the last thing that either of us would have expected, a map. "I'm sure it's a great map and all," Jacob said, clearly less than impressed, "but I thought maybe you would have swiped one or two of your older brother's magazines or something." "Priorities, Jake," Nick said as he rolled his eyes. "I got this from my dad's friend who does survey work. I told him I'm doing a report on the park and how it used to be, and he said he had some old maps. I swiped this one. Hopefully he doesn't miss it, but do you see anything interesting?" I looked over it, Jacob giving it a perfunctory look as he munched potato chips, and thought I saw what Nick was talking about. "You're talking about that," I said, pointing to the square on the map about 2 miles from the campground. Nick smiled. "Yes, indeed," he said with a wicked grin. "That, gentlemen, is the Orville site, a government testing facility that was built in the 1920s and closed in 1971. The info on what they did there is a little hazy, but it had something to do with animals and their uses during the Cold War." "And you just, what?" Jacob said. "Wrung all of this out of some poor government official in your off time?" Nick rolled his eyes. "No, stupid, I use the internet. You should try it sometime." "Look," I said. Bah. Let's try that one again. "Like I said, the info is hazy, but I bet the facility is still there. We should go check it out. I bet it's really cool." "Oh, sure," I said, flopping onto my sleeping bag and grabbing a bag of chips for myself, "'cause Scoutmaster Mark is absolutely going to let the three of us blunder off into the woods in the middle of the night." Apparently at some point, Scoutmaster Mike turned into Scoutmaster Mark, and I didn't catch them all. "Already got that covered," Nick said with a grin as he pulled out his badge book. "There's a badge for spotting indigenous night birds, one of the badges I need to be considered for an Eagle Scout. We're going to go out and spot a few birds, just to cover our tracks. Then we're going to make our way here so we can do a little exploring." "Yeah, that sounds fun and all," Jacob said, "but I think I'll pass." "What, you scared?" Nick asked, clearly trying to goad him a little. "No, but the idea of getting arrested for being caught in a government facility and having to explain to my parents how I got there doesn't sound like a lot of fun." Nick made a rude noise. "This place was abandoned years ago, Jake. Come on, it's our last scout camp out." Hang on. "It's our last scout camp out. Let's do something really fun. What do you say?" To those of you just joining us, we're reading the Orville site, which is a scout story. So pull up a chair. It's just getting good. I shrugged. I'm in, I guess. It does sound like fun, and if the lights are on, we can always leave the way we came. Jacob rolled his eyes. Fine, I guess I'll go too. Worst I can get is tetanus or exposed to Agent Orange, I guess. We decided that we'd go Saturday night, just so it didn't look like we were too eager. Nick spotted some birds that night, just to cover our tracks, and we helped the kids roast marshmallows and hot dogs and sing along to Scoutmaster Mike's terrible guitar playing. Wait, I think we missed one again. Yeah, we did. Apparently, I cannot figure out a name for this guy, so I kept changing it. Commercials? There shouldn't be any commercials yet. That's weird. I don't even think I've monetized this thing yet. That's wild. Shouldn't be any commercials yet. Usually I don't monetize these things till afterwards. And sing along to Scoutmaster Mark's terrible guitar playing. There was no spooky stories the first night. Ghost stories were always for the second and third night for some reason, and as we settled in for bed, we were all excited about what we might find the next day. The next day was full of hiking and badge work for the kiddos. Bobby got his animal spotting badge. Chris got his first aid badge when Terry slipped and cut his knee, and they all got their badge for hiking more than a mile, if they didn't already have it. We swam in the lake, we pointed out some edible berries, and all in all, we had a good day. Let's see. I had almost forgotten about the plan until Nick turned to Scoutmaster Mark and reminded him of it over dinner. Scoutmaster Mark seemed hesitant. We were his responsibility, after all, but Nick assured him that we'd be safe. Should have really left this guy as Mike. Oh, oh, I get it. Yeah, I got to keep saying the name of the thing. That way people who are just joining us know what we're doing. Let's see. Where were we? Nope, he's Mark now. Forever and ever. We'll be back before midnight. Scout's honor, he said, all of us knowing that Scoutmaster Mark would be out cold after 9 and a herd of buffalo wouldn't wake him up until sunrise. So, after getting the little kids settled and saying goodbye to our scoutmaster, the three of us set off into the dark woods. It was 9. The sun had been down for about half an hour, and the night bugs and the evening wildlife were in full swing. We walked through a performance of every mating call and wild cry you can imagine, and when we came to the fork that would usually take us to the swimming hole, Nick took us into the woods instead. Okay, he said, holding up the map and shining his light on it. About a mile this way, and we should hit the perimeter. Look, Jacob said, if this is a joke or something, go ahead and let me know. There's no way any of this is real. This is a scary story that someone made up to freak out kids. If there was a government facility out there, someone would know. We would have seen it. We've hiked all over this. But Nick stopped as he pointed to something up ahead. Hang on. A little more emphasis on that. But Nick stopped as he pointed to something up ahead in the trees. Explain that then, Jake, Nick said, pointing to a rusty barbed wire fence with government property, no trespassing, hung from it. Jacob looked at it like he was seeing a mirage. That could just be an old sign. We all hopped the barbed wire fence and proceeded on. Jacob's protest, getting stuck on the barbs, I suppose. We're reading the Orville site, if you're just joining us, so it's just getting good, so settle in. The woods were unnaturally quiet out here, the leaves scuttering. The leaves scuttering in the wind, the only sound beyond the distant sound of wildlife. There were no birds out here, no insects, and that should have been our first indication that something was wrong. Scouts had taught us that silence in the forest was abnormal, and if you couldn't hear animals, then they had probably gone somewhere else, and you should too. We were all curious about this place that Nick had found, and as we came out of the woods and found ourselves at the edge of a broken concrete road, it only made us want to find this place more. A half hour later, we saw a security hut, but it was dark and unmanned. The glass was starred, cracked. Commercial. The glass was starred, cracks running through it, and the interior was full of dust motes. No one except mice and roaches had been there for years, and we followed the road until we came to a concrete building set into the side of the mountain that rose beside the spring. If you hadn't been looking for it, anyone could have missed the place. It was squat and set into the side of the mountain in such a way as to be nearly undetectable. It was dark, of course, and by the number of abandoned jeeps and trucks in the front, it was pretty clear that no one had been here for a long time. There was no sign to tell us its purpose, only a plaque that read Orville Site. The stories say they tested things on animals in there, Nick said. You think they were making bombs into dogs or like animals that would attack on command? I don't know, I whispered. And I don't care, Jacob said, a shudder creeping into his voice. Let's get out of here. This place is spooky. Hang on, guys. Go on, you. Pay no attention to that. We have an Exodus break here. Okay. Oh, everybody was hanging out in the bedroom for a second there, so let me readjust here. This place is spooky. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Oh, sound good. You guys hear me all right? Check, check, check. When I went to go adjust my thing, it said my USB wasn't recognized, so that's never good. Alrighty. Oh, well, thank you. I'm fond of them. You totally should, Leah, but I'd never push anybody into that. I'll have to get some buttons made or something that say commercial break or something. I always suggest doing it through YouTube, but apparently they take more than Patreon. I really need to set up like a coffee or something. I don't know. Patreon started to take a little bit too much as well. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? Oh, come on, Nick said. It'd be a shame to leave now. We haven't even seen the inside yet. Nuts to that, Jacob said. Ooh, excuse me. Jacob said, come on, we found it, we saw it, now let's go. I got a funny feeling about this place. Something doesn't sit right here. Nick opened his mouth, probably to tell Jacob not to be a baby, when a sound cut through the preternatural silence like a nail on glass. Like nails on glass. Oh, welcome, Leah. Thanks for becoming a member. Ooh, spooky ghost, too. Keep in mind, guys, if you're not a member yet and you join our spooky ghost tier, you get your stories early. So, you know, you're on the board now, Leah. I like to try to be a normal person. Anyway, let's see here. Nick looked to the left of the main entrance, now shuttered by a rolling door, and saw a single door with the word maintenance on it. Something was scratching at it, and at the end of each 5 to second scratching session, it would make a weird keening noise, like a dog that wants to be let out. We all stared at it, not quite believing what we were hearing. But when Nick started walking towards it, I begged him not to go. Sounds like someone's dog stuck in there, Nick said, sounding put out with us. Clearly nothing they were working. Try that again. Clearly nothing they were working on is here, so it's probably someone's lost dog. Well, let them worry about that, Jacob said. Please, Nicky, don't open the door. Nick made a dismissive sound and went to look at the door. It was padlocked shut, but a couple of hard slaps with a rock took care of that old lock. I'm going to change that. I don't like the way that's... A couple of hard slaps with a rock took care of that. Nick opened the door, but no dog was on the other side. He made a clicking noise at it, coaxing it out, and that was when something big and gray jumped on him. It may have once been a dog, but what came out now was all bones and graying skin and piercing red eyes. We're reading the Orville side if you guys are just joining us, so have a seat. It's getting good. Nice. It's not a race, guys. There's plenty of subscriptions for everybody. Let's see here. Jacob and I ran. We couldn't help it. We hadn't been afraid of monsters for about 3 to 4 years now, but when a monster presents itself to you, you remember how easy it is to run. Nick was screaming, his voice cutting through the silence around the facility, and every step away from him was like knives ripping at my skin. He was screaming for help. He was screaming for his father, but I'd heard something else, something that lived below the scream like bugs in the underbrush. It was the clittery sound of claws on the pavement. There were more of them. Climb, I told Jacob, the two of us making for the tree line. We came off the concrete and into the grass, running for the first big gnarled oak we could find. I was the better climber, and I was up the tree in a matter of seconds. Jacob was trying, but he just couldn't get a good grip. He was sliding down as often as he was going up, and I put a hand down to catch hold of him. Take my hand, I yelled, reaching down to get him. Jacob lunged, and our fingers laced as I started to pull him up. I nearly had him high enough to grab the lowest limb when one of those bone dog things jumped and grabbed his ankle. I tried to hold him. I really did. But his sweaty hand slipped off mine, and when he fell, I heard the pack bury his cries under them. I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do. One of those things had gotten Nick. It would tear me to pieces. I held the limb and hid my face, not moving until they finally quieted and stopped savaging Jacob. I glanced down, but he was gone. I looked down, but they were not. There were 6 of them, all of them looking up at me with real interest. Their stubs of tails were wagging like maniac metronomes, and I felt myself shaking as those red eyes stared at me. I thought about climbing higher so maybe they'd forget about me. But if I fell in my fear, then I'd be done for. Instead, I climbed high enough to put my back into a dip in the trunk and got as secure as I could. I don't know how long I sat there, but I must have dozed. I woke up with the midday sun on me and not a skeleton dog to be seen. I looked down hesitantly, not wanting to take any chances, but they were gone. I didn't know if the sun bothered them or if they had gotten bored, but I didn't waste time. I started sprinting for the campsite. I wanted to tell an adult, something I had thought I almost was last night. I wanted to tell them about Nick and Jacob and all those dangerous mutants that would be roaming around now. I needed to tell someone. I needed to tell them before it was too late. It turned out it was already too late. We're reading the Orville site, but we're just about done if you're just joining us. So hang in there, and we'll be on to the next story here in a minute. Let's see. The park rangers and the police were there when I got to the campsite, and they were very happy to see me. Happy wasn't exactly the word. They were curious to know where I had gone, and glad to have a witness. They told me the entire scout troop had been killed. Excuse me. Hey, Nancy, glad you could join us. Well, we're glad to have you, Nancy. Always good to have more people to listen to cool stories. They told me that the entire scout camp had been killed. Nope, we've already got that. It looked like a pack of wild dogs had gotten them, and parts of them had been scattered everywhere. As far as they knew, I was the only survivor. When I told them about the Orville site, one of the cops raised an eyebrow. "You saw it?" he asked, looking at me like he couldn't believe it. And when I told him I had, and what had come out, he walked off to make some phone calls. A helicopter came down as the police were taking me home, and I saw guys with guns and camo hopping out to talk with the police. I read a story not long after about how there had been a dangerous explosion in the park. The and it would be closed until further notice while they made the area safe again. That was 30 years ago, back in 1994. I haven't been camping or hiking since. I haven't been anywhere near Mineral Hills since then. I have no intention of ever going back. I can't even sleep with the windows open without having a panic attack. So if you happen to be camping in the vicinity of Mineral Hills, listen for the silence. There may be more than coyotes in those woods. All right. That is the Orville site. Oh, hello, Nancy. Welcome. Well, you haven't yet. We just did the first story, but there's plenty more. I'm going to save that one for later. Alrighty. Set up the next one here. Whew. Yeah, you know me. I don't pull any punches on my scout stories, so that one was a little grisly. Give me just a second. Let me get some water. I've forgotten my big water cup today. I will be right back. 2 shakes, I promise. Alrighty, sorry about that. I forgot to get my giant cup of water. Gotta wet the pipes there. But, let's move on to our next story. It's another scout story, but this one's a little different. I say that all the time. They're all a little different, aren't they? This one is called Troop 45. So, settle in and we'll read about another scout troop. This is Troop 45. I love hiking in the summertime. It's my favorite time of the year. And even though I know... Hang on. Gotta widen that a little bit. And even though I know it's unadvisable, I like to go solo hiking. The quiet in the woods is intoxicating. Monday through Friday, I sit in my cubicle and type out useless spreadsheets. I missed a word there. Monday through Friday, as I'm sitting in my cubicle typing out useless spreadsheets, I'm thinking of how, come Friday afternoon, I'll be on my way into the woods for another weekend spent in nature. If not for my love of creature comforts, I'd probably... probably have gone off the grid already. I was camping in one of my favorite places, a state park I won't name because they probably don't want the attention. When I walked past the ranger station on Friday, Ranger Donner laughed and called me by name. I'd wondered when I'd see you today. You know there's an opening for a park ranger if you're interested. He had made this offer many, many times before, and it always made me laugh. Thanks again, Ranger Donner, but they just don't pay you guys enough. Amen, brother, he laughed. Be careful out there. There have been some bear sightings recently. I told him I would, and soon enough I was immersed in the loving embrace of the North Georgia woods. This was Appalachian Trail country, and the woods were full of old things and old ways. Some people were scared of those things, but I'd never been more at home. Ugh. But I'd never been at home more than in these old-growth trees. If some of you didn't see him, Nermal has decided to come and join our live stream, so you'll probably see him. He likes to snuggle around. Hey, Nancy. Hey, everybody. Or hey, Nancy. I'm off my game tonight. I had never been more at home than in these old-growth trees. If encountering bears wasn't such a hazard, I would likely have slept out under the stars while I was here. I spent my first night hiking into the park, looking for a stream I had camped beside several times. Can't talk today. Sorry, it's a medical condition. I spent my first night just hiking into the park, looking for a stream I had camped beside several times in the past. Sometimes I fished here, sometimes I just sat and listened to it run, but it was just about the most peaceful place I knew of. The old trees gathered here too, so I guess they liked the river as well, and you could look up at night and see the stars shining through them most any old night. I was always a little jealous of those trees. They got to sit here their whole lives and see those stars, but I was just a tourist. I made it there just as the sun was starting to yawn, and by the time my tent was set up and my fire was dressed, there was no time for fishing. I cooked up some of the food I had brought, hung up my hammock by the light of the dancing fire, and laid out so I could watch the stars. I was careful to put any tasty leftovers away so the bears wouldn't smell them, and put the fire out as my yawns got longer and longer. I slept in the hammock that night and woke up to the sounds of birds and the laughter of the river. It was a great way to start the day, in my humble opinion. I did fish that day, pulling out a couple of little fish and a pretty big trout that must have gotten lost. I looked. Hang on. If you're going to narrate, chapstick is a must. Just a fun fact. I don't know where the other three are, Kay, but Nermal is the one that likes to come around the most. I cooked up the brim for lunch and figured I would save the trout for dinner, and as the day petered by in its slow way, I was sorry that these times ever had to end. I did some chores, got everything ready for nighttime, and as I cooked the trout and read the Grisham novel I'd brought, I thought I saw something coming together a little further down. It could have been other campers, I suppose, but it sounded like kids. It was never anything consistent, a loud laugh here or the sound of a hammer driving in a stake there, but it kept drawing my attention away from my book and back to the woods. I was nowhere near a campground, the place where people with kids like to camp, and I couldn't see anybody coming in this deep on a Saturday if they knew they were going to have to go home on Monday. Maybe I thought it was someone who was taking a week-long trip, but that was crazy too. Why not camp at one of the regular campsites? They had all the amenities and none of the usual worry about bears lumbering in or accidentally wiping with poison oak. Well, I countered, because they, like you, and... Hang on. Well, I countered, because they, like you, want to rough it in the wilderness and feel like real pioneers. The more I picked up the sound of kids, the more I started to think it was more like one or two, and... Bleh. The more I picked up the sounds of kids, the more it started to sound like more than one or two, and less likely... I wrote that weird, I guess. Hang on. What the hell? Okay, that's what I want. Stand by for a second, guys. The more I picked up the sounds of kids, and the more it started to sound like more than one or two, the less likely that seemed. It was edging towards real dark, my trout little more than bones now, when something sprang up all at once and made me whip my head around like I thought the woods were on fire. It was a fire, all right, but it wasn't a forest fire. About 80 feet to my left, and having sprung up like an elven fire in a Tolkien story, was a campfire. The sounds of children, hazy and ghostly before, had coalesced into something more normal now. They were singing campfire songs, and I lifted my nose a little as the smell hit me. Roasting hot dogs, it smelled like. My own fire was low, a going-out fire, and it was almost too dark to read my book. I just about decided to put it out and go to bed when I heard rustling coming my way and perked up. It was making a beeline for my campsite, and it wasn't making any efforts to be quiet. Could be a bear, I thought, or a raccoon who was too full from the scout's cooler to give my offerings much of a sniff. It came closer, slowly making its way to my campsite, its path wobbling a little as it came, but when it stopped about 10 feet away from me, a I felt my breath catch in my throat. Was it watching me? You sometimes heard stories about skinwalkers or wendigos or other weird stuff out here, but I'd never put any stock into it. Now, however, as I sat out here and listened to something getting closer and closer to my camp, I thought there might be onto something. I thought they might be onto something. Then I heard, yeah. Smart move, Nancy. It's always a smart move never to go mucking around with old abandoned government facilities. No, Blondie, I think cemeteries are usually, well, they're not abandoned government facilities. Then I heard a weird raking sound and the unmistakable sound of someone pissing. I looked a little closer, the murky post-sunset light making it hard, and saw a kid in a scout uniform relieving himself on a tree not too far from my camp. He zipped up after he finished, but as he turned to go, he must have seen me, and I saw him start a little. He looked like he might be embarrassed, but he recovered quickly, smiling and lifting a hand to wave. "Geez, sorry, mister. I didn't mean to pee in your campsite. I didn't know anyone else was out here but us." "That's all right," I said. "No harm, no foul." We're reading Troop 45 if you're just joining us, so have a seat. Cemeteries are a great place to find ghost orbs, but they're pretty peaceful generally. I was getting up to put my book away and climbing into my tent for the night. It was going to be a little... Let's try that again. I was getting up to put my book away and climb into my tent for the night. It was going to be a little loud for stargazing, when the kid asked me if I wanted to come and have a hot dog or something. "We've got tons, and I don't think Scoutmaster Dan would mind." I laughed. "No offense, kid, but I doubt your Scoutmaster wants you bringing in random hikers for... Damn it. Try that one again. I doubt your Scoutmaster wants you bringing in random hikers for your wiener roasts." "Oh, he won't mind. We usually invite people to our fire. You can come if you want, but I understand if you don't." I thought about turning him down, but something made me want to go. Maybe it was just the wilderness of... The weirdness, not the wilderness. Maybe it was just the weirdness of finding a scout troop in the woods, but I kind of wanted to go and meet this scoutmaster and find out what they were doing this far out. Curiosity, it seemed, was something I had a little too much of these days. So I agreed, and when I got up on the kid, I could see that he was freckled and ginger-haired. A really bad combo in the scouts for a kid who probably had to use SPF 5000 if he was in the sun. He was dressed in a familiar uniform, though he had a number 45 on his sleeve. I had been a part of Troop... If I could talk today. I had been a part of Troop 41, but I'd never heard of Troop 45 either. I had been a part of Troop 41, but I had never heard of Troop 45 before. Maybe they were new, I thought, and followed the kid back to his campfire. I found 9 other scouts sitting around a roaring blaze with the scoutmaster at the head. He was playing a guitar and singing something I remembered from my own days in the scouts, and when he saw me, his face filled with none of the usual mistrust at an adult who would... his face filled with none of the usual mistrust that an adult would usually have when a stranger wandered into their campsite. He smiled at me, his grin looking predatory in the light, and finished the song before waving us over. "Gabe, who did you find in the woods?" he asked. "He's camping not far from here," the kid, Gabe, said. "I figured he might want a hot dog or something." "Sure, sure," the scoutmaster said. "Have a seat. We got dogs for everyone." He turned to a cooler behind him and pulled out a hot dog and a long skewer so I could cook it. I thanked him, introducing myself and saying I hoped this wasn't any trouble. The guy just waved a hand at me, his smile never slipping. "No, no, no, no trouble at all. Hope you're not scared off by spooky stories, because as soon as the hot chocolate is done, we're having a story before bedtime." I hadn't noticed the big kettle hanging from the hook over the fire till then. It hissed periodically as some of the hot chocolate fell onto the fire, and I watched as I sat down next to Gabe and another kid and cooked my hot dog. We're listening to Troop 45 if you're just joining us, so have a seat. Scoutmaster Dan. That's a different tone. "Scoutmaster Dan tells the best stories," Gabe said, putting another hot dog onto his stick and roasting it. I relaxed a little, feeling at ease in a way I hadn't since I'd been in the Scouts myself. I was at home in the woods, but there was something soothing about sitting amongst your fellow Scouts and roasting hot dogs over an open fire. It was something I hadn't done since I was 14, as something I hadn't done since I was 14, and as my hot dog cooked, I glanced at the kid next to me and asked what his name was. The kid didn't say anything, and the longer the silence went on, the more awkward it felt. The kid's silence was preternaturally heavy, and as I glanced away, it felt like he had drawn me into some gravitational pull. "Don't mind Edwin," Gabe said, through a mouthful of hot dog. "He's kind of weird." Scoutmaster Dan started passing out hot chocolate then, taking it down and pouring it into those insulated paper cups. He grinned that odd grin as he handed it to me. He passed one to Edwin, a little harder than he should have, and I expected the kid to yelp as some of it dripped over onto his hand. Instead, he just nodded at the Scoutmaster, and that's supposed to be as. Instead, he just nodded at the Scoutmaster as he went around to hand out the rest of them. "Well then," Dan said, as he came back to the head of the fire, "let's all give a toast to this year's campout and to the start of spooky stories. Huzzah!" he said, and drank. It must have been scalding, but the kids drank too and finished their cups in one pull. I made to drink mine as well. The hot chocolate smelled great, but I looked down to see that Edwin had put a hand over my cup. He shook his head at me and gave me this weird look as he quickly tapped the cup. Weird look as he quickly traded cups with me and drank mine too. Dan's cup must have been fuller than everyone else's because he was the first to start and the last to finish drinking. Boy, that hits the spot, right, kids? Now for tonight's story. Let's tell the old classic about the crazed Scoutmaster. Most of them oohed appreciatively, and as Dan stood over the fire, the shadows turned his face into a ghastly, grinning mask. Once, there was a Scoutmaster who took his troop out for a summer camp out. He brought them to the woods, he fed them, he sang for them, and then it came time for the stories and the customary hot chocolate. One of the kids coughed, but I barely noticed as Dan started the story. He passed the hot chocolate around, and they all drank deeply, and as the warmth washed over them, he began his tale. Hot chocolate does sound pretty good right now. Another kid coughed, really hacking it up, and I guessed that was understandable if he'd quaffed the whole mug of hot chocolate in one go. Little did the scouts know that their scoutmaster had gone a little bit cuckoo. You see, the scoutmaster's wife had left him. He was living on a friend's couch, and his car was being towed from the school parking lot, even as he sat in the woods. The scoutmaster's life was over, some would say, but he didn't want it to end alone. So he did put something in the drinks, something that would ensure he had company on the other side. More of the kids were coughing now, and I turned as one of them let out a jet of vomit and fell over. What the hell? Was something going on here? Most of the kids were listening to the story, and even the ones who were coughing or throwing up were looking at the scoutmaster with rapt attention. I wanted to do something to help them, but yet again, Edwin, the silent kid, put a hand on my hand and shook his head. Put a hand over mine and shook his head. So he told them what he had done. Their scoutmaster told them the scariest story of all, the story of their own death. He was looking at me now, seeming surprised that I wasn't coughing, but not overly so. They cried and wept. They begged him to say it wasn't true, but it was too late by then. Some of them had already begun to get sick, and as they all died, so too did the crazy scoutmaster. Now the shadows cast by the fire seemed more like they were revealing him than masking him. Scoutmaster Dan had thick purple bags under his eyes, and his throat was swollen like he'd been hung. His skin was ragged and pale, and as he grinned at me, I saw a roach crawl from his mouth and scuttle over his neck. "That should have been the end of the story," he said, his voice growing raspy. "But every year, the scouts come back for one last jamboree. They cook hot dogs, they sing songs, and they drink their hot chocolate and die all over again. Sometimes they find other people to come with them, and the crazy scoutmaster finds more victims for his troop." I caught something from the corner of my eye, and when I turned to look, I could see others gathering around the edge of the circle. Drifters, hikers, and even a couple of park rangers were standing there, all looking ghostly and all staring darkly into the void. I turned back and jumped. Scoutmaster Dan was right in my face, his terrible grin more skeletal than ever. "It looks like Edwin has stopped you from..." "It looks like Edwin has stopped me from adding another new friend to our circle. That's okay, though. There's always more, and there will always be more poor, lost souls to add to our troop." His mouth opened much too wide then, and as his skin split and his body fell to dust, I turned to Edwin and mouthed a quick thank you. He opened his mouth to speak, but only bugs came out, and as he too fell into dust, I must have passed out or something. I woke up and prayed that it had all been a dream I'd had in my hammock, but I was still by the remains of the scouts' campfire, and the old and faded cup was sitting on the ground by my feet. I packed up and made my way out of the woods as quickly as possible. I decided I had camped enough this weekend, maybe for several weekends, and as I came back to the ranger station, Ranger Donner hailed me. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, har har, because he called me again and came running up to ask if everything was okay. Before I could stop myself, I asked him if he knew anything about Boy Scout Troop 45, and he went pale. Yeah, that's a little bit of local legend, that. Scoutmaster took his troop on a weekend hike and poisoned them. He used some kind of herbs or something, and kids stopped breathing and just kind of went out. That was in, he thought about it, 75 or 76, they tell me. Why? Did you find something out there, or an old tent or something? I told him I hadn't. I was still just curious about it, but I don't think he believed me. Sometimes people report weird things out in the woods about this time of year. They say they can hear campfire songs or smell hot dogs and hot chocolate cooking. Sometimes they also say they see people. Sometimes people go missing. I'm glad you weren't one of them, kid. I think I might give it some time before I go back to the woods. Some time and maybe a change of campgrounds. I don't want to find myself anywhere close to that particular fire again. And that was Troop 45. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I got to get caught up. It looks like you guys have been having a rousing conversation about cemeteries or something. Sounds like you guys have got some ghost stories that would make some pretty good stories, too. Let's see here. I think our next one is going to be a Ranger Tale, which will be our Monday story. So I hope you guys are ready for that. Thank you, Susie. Ranger stories are sometimes my favorite. I really like to do Ranger stories. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let me find the right story. There it is. Alright, this one's going to be our Monday story, since you guys seem to like the idea of a Ranger Tale. Which, I mean, it fits in good with the theming we've got going on here. Alrighty, this one is called Something in the Woods, and it may remind you of a story we read a little earlier, so keep that in mind if it sounds a little bit familiar. Alright, so, Something in the Woods. I've been taking mid-shifts a lot more with my friend Jacob. Some of you will remember Jacob from the story about the maybe skinwalker. He's a pretty good guy, been here for a long time, and boy, does he have some stories. I told him about the moths and the train, and he told me some things too. He told me about hikers missing beers and how someone had set seen a set of stairs in the woods. So I guess it happens here too. He spent a lot of time sitting in carts and we spent a lot of time sitting in carts and checking campsites for thieving raccoons or hungry bears, and that leaves a lot of time to talk. There was one story that he wouldn't share, however. It was something that had happened a long time ago, something to do with a group of scouts. It had been bad, whatever it was, but Jacob wouldn't say much more than that. I poked a few times, curious about the whole troop of scouts, and how they could have been hunted or hurt or killed without anyone having heard about it. But he kept saying he didn't want to talk about it yet. One night, though, we got a call about an animal attack near the east side of the park. I had just come in from the toilet, wiping my hands on my shorts since the dispenser was out of towels, and found him holding the phone and shaking a little. Are you alive? He asked. Try that one again. Uno momento, guys. It sounds like I've got a little situation going out there. Let me check on that, and I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that, guys. A little situation going on out there. See, had to see what was going on, make sure everything was okay. Let's pick it back up. Where were we? Oh yeah, we were reading Something in the Woods. It was a ranger tale, so we'll pick that back up where we left off. Oh yeah, that's a good idea, Blondie. If you guys have got some stories, definitely write them up for the writing contest, and definitely join my Discord. In fact, if you remind me towards the end, hang on, I can do it now. I'll put up a link to the Discord. That way, you guys can get in if you need to. I know Discord's kind of a young kid sort of thing, but I find it pretty useful. All right, hang on. Where is there? It is. Alrighty, here I'll get you guys a. Okay, that needs to go away. I don't know what to do with that. You totally should. You should write all of them down. That way they don't get lost. I know I sometimes forget to write stuff, and I lose things. I know there's a button here that lets me invite people to my server. Where is it? I'm really bad at this. I'm sorry, guys. Shoot, I know there's a way to do this. Okay. That sounds like a great idea, Lou. I might have to buy a box of wine myself. Alright, so let's see if this does anything. Alright, see if that does anything. That should be the, oh, hey, Pegalicious. Welcome. That should get you into the Discord server. That's my Discord server. So if you guys want to hang out in there and swap stories and stuff, go right ahead. And that's probably be somewhere we'll use during the contest too. So feel free to, hang out in there. Let's see, where were we? You joined at just the right time, Peg. We are doing a Ranger Tale story, so you haven't missed much. Alright, let's see. Are they alive, he asked, staring at the wall as whoever was on the phone talked pretty much. Talked pretty loud. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, drag them into the bathroom and... We'll drag them into the bathroom and bar the door. Clean them up. I'll have park services en route to your location as soon as possible. Don't open the door unless somebody tells you they're with park services, okay? Sit tight. Try to stop the bleeding. We'll be en route. He hung up the phone and went to the cabinet with the rifles in it. Saddle up, kid, he said, tossing me a shotgun, which I caught as smoothly as I could. We've got an emergency. He was stuffing rifle rounds into his pocket, and as I swung the shotgun over my shoulder, he tossed me a box of shells, too. What's the trouble, Jay? A couple of hikers have been attacked by an animal, he said, slapping a shell into the rifle and putting more into his pocket. A dog, they said, but... He opened his mouth as if he meant to say more, but closed it again and slung the rifle over his shoulder. Come on, I don't want to be out there alone if it's what I think it is. I followed behind him, the shells in my pocket smacking into my thigh lightly. What? What is it? He growled as he started to climb into the Jeep, but checked his frustration. Get in. I'll fill you in on what we might be walking into. I climbed in, checking that the safety was on my shotgun before I laid it across my lap, and we were off. Jay had leaned the rifle between the seats, and I saw him reach into his pocket and pull out a crumpled pack of Marlboros. He fished one out and then offered it to me. I shook my head, and he put it in his own mouth and lit it, taking a drag before rolling the window down. If they knew we were smoking in the work truck, the higher-ups would have had a cow. But it looked like Jacob needed it. You remember what I told you happened at the Franklin Moore campground? Yeah, I said, wincing as we hit a bump that sent the gun sliding a little before I grabbed it. You said something had killed a bunch of scouts. Well, it wasn't the only thing like that happened around here. A lot of weird shit happens around here. You've probably figured that out. Sometimes people get killed because of it. Well, we used to have a pretty nice campground on the west side, near LaGrange, called the Mineral Hills State Park. It was my first post, back before they made this whole Magilla State Park, and back in 2000... Blech, if I could talk. They made this whole Magilla State Park back in 2008. I was fresh back then, back on the job about 6 months when we got a call about a massacre. Mineral Hills was pretty peaceful, kind of place where you mostly gave directions and warned people about curious bears. The ranger I was working with for 6 months... Blech. The ranger I was working under told me, for 6 months he told me, how lucky I was to be in this position. This is a great place to learn your job so you can get a cushy spot in a different park. Well, it was great, till it wasn't. He took a curve a little too fast, and I grabbed the handle over the door before my head could slam into the glass. Easy, Jay, I hissed. You're going to give me a but he went right on like he hadn't heard me. We're reading Something in the Woods, if you're just joining us. It's part of our Ranger Tales series, so, have a seat. Have a good story. We're not even to the meat yet, so join in at just the right time. I was coming in when Paul, the ranger in charge of my training, tossed a rifle at me and told me to come on. It was barely dawn, and I asked him what the hell could have happened this early in the morning. He told me I was about to find out, and boy, was he right. We got into the pickup they had given us to work from, and we pulled up outside the gates of hell. It was a massacre. 12 scouts and their scoutmaster were dead. We found about 5 scattered near the woods, also dead. We were at a total loss. Some of these kids had been laughing and playing in the spring just the day before, and it was my first time seeing something like that. The cops weren't far behind us, but the real surprise was when some kid came stumbling out of the woods. He was unharmed, so far as I could tell, but he was exhausted, and he was scared to death. We came past the sign that told us we were entering the west limits of the park, and Jay slowed down a little bit. He told us a story, one I wasn't sure I believed, but I couldn't argue with. He said he and his 2 friends had gone looking for some old building, something called the Orville site, and when one of the cops heard him, he asked if he was sure. He called someone while we questioned the kids, and he told us his friends were dead, and the thing that had killed them was loose. We put him in a police car so that they could get him to the hospital, and that was when the helicopter landed. The helicopter? I asked. Not sure I believed him, and Jay nodded. Yup, one of those big green whirly-birds. Bunch of guys in military fatigues. The officer told them what the kid had said, and they came to Paul and I and asked if we could help look for the animal that had done this. You 2 know the park, and I'm hoping you can help us find these things before they do it again. That should have been a red flag, but it wasn't. I was too young, too new, and Paul agreed to go with them, so did I. We set off, heading into the woods, as the 6 of them followed behind. They wanted to see the Orville site first, and as we came down the old road and found the installation, I wondered how I'd never seen it before. It wasn't huge, about the size of a warehouse, but it should have been important enough to come check on every now and again. Paul looked away when I asked him about it and said it wasn't part of our job, so that had to be good enough. We found 2 more kids there. Both of them were ripped to pieces, and the man who had asked us to come along made a call before we headed out again. We stopped by the campground. This was the minerals. Try that one again. We stopped by the campground. This one was the miners' ground, and there was only one tent. The trail of blood wasn't hard to follow, and Jay knocked on the door before telling them to what. Jay knocked on the door before telling me to watch his back while he talked to the victims. I felt a little silly as I watched the woods with my loaded shotgun, but when I glanced back to see who he was talking to, it made me feel less so. There was a man and a woman, and the man looked like a buzzsaw had attacked his leg. I was pretty sure I could see bone amidst the shredded meat, and when Jay saw me peeking, he yelled at me to keep watch. I could hear them talking about a feral dog, a dog that might have mange or some kind of disease. They said it had been nosing around the cooler, and when the man had gone to scare it off, it had attacked. They had kicked it away and ran, and by the dent in the door, it had nearly been a body identification job. They said it had run off just before they called us, and tracks weren't too hard to follow. Jay told them to sit tight and wait on the paramedics, and the 2 of us headed off after the tracks. He sighed as we followed. This was actually pretty close to the place we found those things. We are reading Something in the Woods, which is a Ranger tale if you're just joining us, so pull up a chair. Let's see what you guys have been up to. Discord can be a little bit hard to use sometimes. That's true. Yeah, if you click it, Peg, it'll add you. It's a good place to meet up. Like, it's a good meeting place for people that, like, have hobbies and interests and stuff. All right. Let's continue. Yeah, I asked. You think this might have something to do with that? Don't see how, Jay said, the rifle at the ready. We got 'em all, and they were a lot better at killing than whatever this was. I guess there's no way to tell, but I hope so. We walked on for a little while before he started telling it again. About half a mile from here is the spring. That's where we found them. They they had gorged themselves, and all 6 of them were laid out with fat bellies and lolling tongues. They were the most terrible things I've ever seen. They were like starved dogs, even when full. Their skin was gray, and I was pretty sure I could see bones poking out in places. They were only a little larger than Dobermans, but the closer we got, the more bones I saw beneath their skin. It was like looking at a piece of extremely well done Halloween decoration, and the man in charge put a lot and the man in charge put up a closed fist when we were 50 feet away. He counted down with his fingers, and then they all stood up in one fluid motion and opened fire. They had all sat up, preparing to run, but the bullets cut them to pieces. They'd been hauling those assault rifles all day. Hang on. Got too many theys there. The dog things had all set up, preparing to run, but the bullets cut them to pieces. They'd been hauling those assault rifles all day, and it was good to see that they weren't just for show. Paul and I kept our heads down. Our rifles would have been wasted. But when I peeked up, I was shocked to see that they were still trying to move. The creatures were shredded. Some of them had limbs just laying nearby, or their heads lolling off, but they were still crawling and clawing to get closer to the soldiers. It's the strangest thing I'd ever seen. And as they shot dry, they all stopped to reload so they could shoot again. As they slapped magazines into weapons, I couldn't help but focus on the twitching pieces of the creatures as they tried to get at their killers. I remembered hearing about people on drugs who would take bullet after bullet before they went down. It was the age of the war on terror, after all. But this was something worse. I saw a clawed foot inching closer, a head bobbing along as its jaws snapped and its eyes leaked, and a tail that was more whipped than anything that just kept wagging. They put another drum. Get out of here, you. They put another drum of bullets down the range, cutting them into chunks, and when they were satisfied, they shouldered their guns and got to work. They started lighting them up, collecting the bits and setting them on fire, and the pieces stopped twitching as they fell to ashes. We searched the grounds from dawn till dusk, and when the men called a halt and told us that we could go, I felt like I might drop. We heard something up ahead, and Jay put a hand out to stop me. We eased closer, slow walking, so as not to make a lot of noise, and found something gray and furry nosing into a hole at the base of a tree. Jay sighed, relieved when he saw it, and as it spun around with its teeth bared and its fur up, Jay shot it in the face. It was a wild dog, and I wasn't positive, but I was pretty sure that it had rabies. Thank God, Jay said. I was really afraid it was one of those weird dog things. He pulled a black trash bag out of his pocket, and after checking it for movement, he shoved the dog into the bag and handed it to me. I did the... If I could talk. I did the deed. You carry the body. EMTs will probably want that to test it for rabies or something. Come on, let's go. If you're just joining us, we're coming to the tail end of our Ranger Tales story, which is Something in the Woods. But don't worry, we've got at least one more to go. I'm starting to lose my voice, but it's nothing serious just yet. Let's see here. As we walked back, I noticed the dark clouds had left Jay. So what happened the last time, I asked. Military closed the park for a while, and Paul and I were sent on a 2-week vacation. They got rid of the warehouse when we were gone, dropped the mountain on it or something, and we were told to pretend it had never existed. It was transferred here a year later, and until it became part of the park, I hadn't thought about that time outside of nightmares for years. We handed the dog off to the EMTs, and they took the guy to the hospital, where he thankfully did not have rabies. He did end up losing the leg, but he didn't die the slow and agonizing death that comes with rabies, so that was good. All in all, it wasn't a bad day, but it makes me a lot more mindful of the time I spend in the woods, and that sometimes my curiosity might need to be checked. Who knows what other secrets might be waiting out in the deeper parts of the forest. Alrighty. Oh. Yeah, you guys aren't wrong. People do kind of suck sometimes. Present company excluded. Oh, excuse me. Whew. Well, let's see what else we got in here. I think we've got time for a Kashmir story. Yeah, I think we've got time for the Kashmir story. Before my voice completely goes out. Let's see. It's one of our new special Wednesday Kashmir stories, so you guys have been liking those pretty good, it sounds like. Guys have enjoyed hearing a little bit more about the other people that reside there in Kashmir, which is always cool. Let's stretch that up. There we go. Alrighty. So, this one... That's alright, Peg. You know how these things go. They usually go for a couple hours, and then my voice dies. I'll have to start doing some of these a lot more often. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I might try to start doing some of these during the week. You know, YouTube says I should do more live streams, and my dwindling monetization would probably agree with them. But, anyway. Hopefully you're alright there, Blondie. A trip to the hospital is nothing to sneeze at. Anyway, though, we'll be hearing about a little diner in Kashmir that a lot of the locals like to go to. This story is called The Customer is Always Right. Miss Blair smiled at the pair of confused diners as she set two plates down on the table. They had both been looking at the menu, not yet sure what they wanted. Hang on. Let's try that again. Miss Blair smiled at the pair of confused diners as she sat down two plates on the table. Try this again. I'm getting a lot of chatter in the background here. Hang on. Miss Blair smiled at the pair of confused diners as she sat two plates down on the table. They had both been looking at the. Hang on a second, guys. Sorry about that. It's distractions and whatnot. Miss Blair smiled at the pair of confused diners as she set two plates down on their table. They had both been looking at the menu, not yet sure what they wanted, but when they looked at the plates, she saw them smile in amusement. "Y'all enjoy," Miss Blair said, turning to walk away before the woman politely called her back. "Excuse me, ma'am, but we haven't ordered yet." Miss Blair shook her head. "No one does. Everyone gets what they want at Blair's." Yeah. No one does. Everyone gets what they want at Blair's, though. That's what you wanted, wasn't it? She had brought the man meatloaf with gravy, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a wedge of pie. She had brought the woman chicken and waffles with hash browns and eggs on the side. Both looked at their plates in confusion, but both nodded as they began to eat. It had been what they wanted, everything cooked to perfection, and that's how it had always been. "Hey there, Miss Blair," Sheriff Guthrie said as he and Claire, one of the new deputies at the station, came in out of the... If I could talk today. Came in out of the misting rain. "Sheriff Guthrie, Miss Claire, you two pick out a table. I'll be right back." She brought them sweet teas, and when she sat down, a medium well steak and a baked potato and a plate of cowboy burger. A few measurements. Like for what? I'm always happy to answer questions. And a plate with a cowboy burger and crinkle cut fries. Guthrie shook his head at her. "How do you do that, Miss Blair?" Miss Blair smiled and shrugged. "It's a gift." It was a gift, of sorts, too. Miss Blair had never really been sure if it was... Oh, um... I... I have no idea, Peg. Peg, shoot me an email, and I'll see if I can't get them for you. It'd be nice to have a new top hat. Mine got a little bit squished in the move. Um, but yeah, see if I can send you some sizes and whatnot. Miss Blair had never really been sure if it was precognition or just intuition, but she always knew what people wanted to eat. When Miss Blair had come to Kashmir, back in '75, it had been because her bus had stopped here for no real reason at all. She had gotten out to use the bathroom, but when she came back, the bus had gone and she was stranded. No luggage, no clothes, not even a toothbrush. And she discovered, too late, that she had left her purse on the bus too. She had wandered out to look for help, and that was when she had seen the Help Wanted sign. The diner had been the classic silver trailer with the chrome piping and the soft neon lights. It looked like 1,000 other greasy spoon diners in 1,000 other towns, but this one seemed to call out to her. She went inside, sat down at the counter, and when the girl behind the counter asked her what she could do for her, she asked about the job posting. "Well, ain't you a godsend? I could sure use some help. When can you start?" Let's check the chat here for a minute. Oh, Peg, if you join the Discord, I guess I can send them to you there too. That could always work. Let's see. "How about right now?" Blair asked, and the girl laughed as she dragged the cook out from behind the grill and told him to hire this one right away. "I got a feeling about her. She'll do just fine here." Blair had meant it to be temporary, only until she could get enough money together to get to Boulder. But a week had become a month had become a year, and before she knew it, she'd been in Kashmir for 2 decades. Mike, the owner and cook, had told her that she could stay in the room over the restaurant till she got her feet under her, but her feet had never really taken her out of Kashmir. She stayed, she kept serving the slop, and when Mike hadn't showed up one morning, she and Mary, the girl who had insisted she be hired, had gone to his apartment and found him dead. The bell rang over the door, and Blair smiled as she saw Dr. Winters walk in with Juliet, her receptionist. "Hey, Miss Blair," Juliet said, smiling as she waved. Dr. Winters gave her a head nod and a mysterious smile as the two of them took a booth and they picked up the menus. Well, Juliet did, but Dr. Winters merely sat placidly and listened to the younger woman jabber. Juliet was high energy, always had been, but Dr. Winters... Miss Blair shuddered. That one was a little spooky. When she... If I could read... When she popped down a beet salad and a chicken salad sandwich with Lay's potato chips, Juliet tittered and put her menu down. "It's like something in a carnival," she said as she picked up the sandwich. "You never get it wrong." "Never," Dr. Winters agreed as she picked up her fork. Miss Blair tried to ignore the container that she was shaking over the salad. It wasn't cheese, that much was sure, but what it could be, she didn't want to think too hard about. It was best, especially in Kashmir, not to put your nose in people's business. Miss Blair had seen some strange things here, but her old manager's death had been pretty common. Michael Downs... Michael Downs had been eating his usual dinner, a burger from the diner with home fries and blueberry pie, when the grease content of his blood had gotten to the critical level and his heart had said... if I could talk today. Had said that enough was enough. He had died in his lazy boy while watching the nightly news, his hand frozen to his chest. Miss Blair had wondered over the state of his apartment when the landlord had let them in. He lived simply, a one-bedroom apartment at the Quiet Arms, and she believed that the studio apartment she stayed at over the diner was nicer than the place he had chosen to live. There was no wife waiting for him at home, no kids to mourn his passing, not even a dog to wonder where he was being carted off to. He went to work, he cooked food for the masses, and then he returned home to do it all the next day. There were no trophy fish or deer heads, no tables strewn with hobbies, and she wondered how anyone could live such a simple existence. Oof. That does sound pretty tasty, I'm not gonna lie. Alrighty. Mary had wondered over. Mary had wondered over what would happen to the diner, and Blair had wondered what would become of her home. She had a plan, but it would depend a lot on luck. "Miss Blair," trumpeted Deputy Parks as he and Woods came in with Ellis and Manx in tow. They were all in uniform, but it was pretty clear that Parks and Woods were nearly off, and the other two were just coming in. She brought them all coffee, leaving the pot behind, and came back with pancakes and eggs for Woods, meatloaf and mashed potatoes with gravy for Parks, a cowboy burger for Ellis, and a chicken tender basket for Manx. They all tucked in without comment, all of them. They all tucked in without comment, all of them accustomed to this low-grade telepathy of hers. And Parks told them for the 1,000th time that he would happily make an honest woman out of her. Ugh, I can't read today. And Parks told her for about the 1,000th time that he would happily make an honest woman out of her one of these days, if it meant he got to eat her cooking every night. She laughed. "Freddie Parks, I'm old enough to be your mother. You better watch it with that kind of talk." They talked and laughed amongst themselves as Miss Blair headed back to grab a pitcher of sweet tea. Table 8 was almost out, and she couldn't have that. The bank had been hesitant about giving her a loan for the diner, but it hadn't turned out to be a problem in the end. Mary had invited her to stay with her until everything was worked out, but neither of them knew how they were going to get the cash together. Between them, they had a down payment, but that was about it. If the bank wouldn't extend them credit, then they were out of luck. Mary said they could probably get work at the Biltmore house, but Blair didn't want to work somewhere else. She'd found herself stopping on the sidewalk to look into the windows of the old place. It looked lonely without them, without the people who ate there every day, and it was more than Blair could stand. Mike's service was... Allergies are kicking up. Mike's service was well attended. The community had loved his diner, and they had loved his gruff nature and his occasional smiles. He was laid to rest at Whispering Pines long before Earl had come to work there, but as she and Mary had left the graveside, a man in a suit had called their names. He told them that Mike had named them in his will, and they were performing the reading that afternoon. He asked if they would attend, and Blair said that she wouldn't miss it for the world. They were reading was... Oh, God. The will reading was the final nail in the coffin of her ever-leaving Kashmir. "Miss Blair," said a robust voice, and Blair looked up to see Monica Maisie, the kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school. She was dressed in her best floral print dress, the one with the tropical flowers on it. and as she sat down, Blair was already setting her usual in front of her. There was a chicken salad, crinkle-cut cucumbers, a house salad, and warm tea. Monica shook her head in amazement, something she often did. "I swear, Miss Blair, I will never understand how you do that." Miss Blair shrugged dramatically. "Just my little gift." The will reading covered only a few things, but all of them were very important to the former Michael Downs. There was a middle-aged man with no hair to speak. There was a middle-aged man. Try that one again. There was a middle-aged man with no hair to speak of, a blonde woman with the look of motherhood on her face, and the two of them. Mr. Wundler, the lawyer presiding over the proceedings, held up a single piece of paper and read out the last will and testament of their former boss. "To my sister, I leave my truck, my record collection, and Dad's coin collection." The woman nodded and thanked him. "To my brother, I leave my life savings, my shotgun, and Mom's cookware." The man nodded, also thanking him. "To my two best employees, Mary Moore and Miss Blair, I leave you the diner. Take care of it, as I have all these years. The two of you are equal parts owner. Make me proud." And it had been like that, until Mary had died a few years later from an aneurysm. Blair had hated that. Mary had been such a dear little thing, but the diner had been Miss Blair's after that, and had been for years and years to come. She was cleaning the counter now, the crowd gone with the afternoon sun, and as she looked over her little kingdom, she wondered how much longer it would be hers. Would she go to bed one night too and never wake up? Would she have a heart attack over her bowl of evening soup? Who was to say? Did anyone ever really know? The bell rang, and as she looked up to tell the person they were closed, she saw who it was. This was a regular that she could have done without. They were dressed in a long coat, the hat pulled down over their ears. The hat pulled down over their ears was the fuzzy kind, preferred by guys in foreign movies. It had ducked to get in through the door, and as it once fell, and as its once fell over her like a cowl, Miss Blair shuddered. "Go to the back. I'll join you there presently." It nodded, heading towards the door that led to the storeroom, and Miss Blair went to get what it wanted from the kitchen. She kept things like that for just such an occasion, and Mary used to think she was crazy to order stuff that no one would want. Most of the customers wanted burgers and fries or home-cooked meals, but organ meats were rarely on the table. Blair made a face as she took a plate of livers, kidneys, and a raw cow heart to the back room. At Miss Blair's, everyone got what they wanted. Everyone. And that's it. Whew. I think that will do it for tonight, guys. I'm about shot out in the voice department. Oh, I hope you guys have enjoyed tonight's live stream. I know I have. These Saturday live recordings are always so much fun, and I'm glad that you guys have joined me for them. Come back next week for more. I don't know, I might surprise you guys with a middle of the week live stream one of these days. I'm sure I'll let you guys know ahead of time so you know to be there. Any rate, till then, this is Dr. Plague signing off. Have a wonderful evening.